Parable of the Unjust Judge. The parable of the unjust judge can be found in the New Testament in the Gospel of Luke, specifically in Luke 18:1-8. Here is the story of the parable of the unjust judge. Then Jesus told his disciples a parable to show them that they should always pray and not give up. He said, "In a certain town, there was a judge who neither feared God nor cared what people thought. And there was a widow in that town who kept coming to him with the plea, 'Grant me justice against my adversary.' For some time, he refused. But finally, he said to himself, 'Even though I don't fear God or care what people think, yet because this widow keeps bothering me, I will see that she gets justice so that she won't eventually come and attack me.' And the Lord said, 'Listen to what the unjust judge says. And will not God bring about justice for his chosen ones, who cry out to him day and night? Will he keep putting them off? I tell you, he will see that they get justice, and quickly. However, when the Son of Man comes, will he find faith on the earth?'" In this parable, Jesus conveys a powerful lesson about the importance of persistence in prayer and faith in God. The unjust judge. In a certain town, there was a judge who neither feared God nor cared about the opinions of others. He was indifferent to justice and was not known for his righteousness. The persistent widow. In the same town, there was a widow who had a legal dispute or adversary. She repeatedly came to the unjust judge, pleading for justice against her adversary. The judge's response. Initially, the judge ignored the widow's pleas and refused to grant her justice. However, due to the widow's persistence and her continuous appeals, he eventually relented, saying to himself that he would give her justice to avoid her continued bothering. The Lord's lesson. Jesus uses this parable to teach his disciples about the importance of persistent prayer and faith. He contrasts the unjust judge with God, highlighting that if even an unjust judge would eventually respond to persistent requests, how much more would a just and loving God respond to the prayers of his chosen ones? Jesus assures that God will bring about justice for his chosen ones who cry out to him day and night. The final question. Jesus concludes the parable by posing a question about faith. He asks whether, when the Son of Man comes, he will find faith on the earth. This question underscores the importance of faith and persistence in prayer, even in the face of delays or apparent unanswered prayers. The parable of the unjust judge emphasizes the value of persistent and unwavering faith in prayer. It encourages believers to continue seeking God in prayer, even when it seems that their petitions are not immediately answered, with the assurance that God will ultimately respond to their cries for justice and help. The parable of the unjust judge offers valuable lessons about persistence in prayer and faith. Different interpretations emphasize various aspects of its message. Here are some common interpretations. 1. Persistence in prayer. The primary interpretation stresses the importance of persistently seeking God in prayer. The parable encourages believers not to lose heart but to continue praying even when it seems that their prayers are not being answered immediately. 2. God is a just and responsive judge. The parable uses the contrast between the unjust judge and God to highlight the character of God as just and responsive. It conveys the idea that if an unjust judge would eventually grant justice due to persistence, how much more will a just and loving God respond to the prayers of his faithful? 3. The widow's character. Some interpretations focus on the character of the persistent widow. She represents the persistence and faith of God's people, especially those who are oppressed or marginalized. The parable encourages believers to be like the widow, unrelenting in their pursuit of justice and righteousness. 4. Endurance in prayer amid delays. This interpretation underscores the importance of endurance in prayer, particularly when faced with delays or seemingly unanswered prayers. It reminds believers that God's timing may not always align with their expectations. 5. A call to prayer for justice. The parable highlights the need to pray for justice, especially in situations where there is oppression or injustice. It encourages believers to pray for God's intervention in such circumstances. 6. The element of faith. The parable raises the question of faith. When Jesus asks whether he will find faith on the earth when he comes, it emphasizes the connection between persistence in prayer and faith. It suggests that continued prayer reflects a deep and enduring faith. 7. Comparing earthly authorities to God. Some interpretations focus on the contrast between the unjust judge's reluctance and God's willingness to respond to his children's needs. It underscores the superior nature of God's character and emphasizes the assurance that God will provide justice. 8. A warning against giving up. The parable serves as a warning against giving up on prayer when faced with difficulties or apparent obstacles. It encourages believers to maintain their trust in God's faithfulness and willingness to respond to their needs. These interpretations collectively emphasize the parable's core message of persistent prayer and unwavering faith, with variations in emphasis on the characters, the nature of God, and the situations to which this lesson applies. Different Christian traditions and theologians may place varying emphasis on these interpretations based on their theological perspectives and teachings.